So my question now would be, one of the best ways to show critical thinking is the ability to write prose. Because the moment you know how to write, you can edit, you can audit. So some people claim that AI is cutting our ability to write, our writing skills, and therefore it's cutting our ability to think critically about the words that we use. So my question now would be, it's hard to balance these two because as a human, our bias is always to conserve energy. My question now would be, what's your response to that?
Yeah, that's a super big question that I think lots of not just organizations, but educational institutions as well are thinking about, Jaslyn. It's a really important one. So if we think, I guess if we think about writing, right, sure, it can be easy for us to think about, oh, it's sentences and words on a page kind of thing, right? Then we can go a level deeper, I think, to go, well, what else does writing do? So it's one of those things that actually helps us to organize our thoughts. So, and there's lots of things that go into writing something well. And you touched on some of them in your question, right? So when you talked about information overload, like one of the things that we often do when we're trying to write something, whether it's a thesis or something else, is we're usually drawing on other bits of information. So if we have an aim with our writing, we generally have to be able to find what are the relevant sources that I want to draw on, what are the bits of information or data that are going to be important to help me write this thing, whatever the purpose of it is. And that's a skill in itself, right? Knowing where do I get my evidence? How do I verify that evidence? How do I know that it's quality? And we know this is one of the established problems still with things like generative AIs like ChatGPT, is that it can still do this thing we call hallucinate, which is it can make up things which look plausible, but they're just not true. And it can also hallucinate things like evidence or references. So it can make up sources which again sound plausible, but don't actually exist. So for us, one of those skills is still how do we find quality, reliable, relevant information or data to help underpin our writing? And then how do we synthesize all of that and pull it all together in a way that's coherent, that's going to fit the purpose of what the thing is that I'm trying to write? And so this is where that whole, how do I organize my thoughts in a structured way? How do I get my thinking together? What point am I trying to make, or points am I trying to make? And how am I going to make them in a compelling way while I'm bringing in evidence to support those things? And then how do I write it in a way that matches what my audience needs, that's coherent and consistent, and all of those sorts of things? So we know that actually, these things like ChatGPT can do, some of that stuff pretty well, right? Again, it's got limitations, but it can do some of that stuff pretty well. But if we don't know how to do that, we are missing out on important skills. So, when we say things like critical thinking is important, a lot of the stuff that I was talking about there help us to develop our critical thinking.